Hey there, Heaven's Echoes family. So glad to have you here. Have you ever felt caught in a cycle of bad choices, or perhaps faced the painful consequences of past deceptions? Have you longed for a deep transformation, but didn't know how to achieve it? The Bible, in its brutal honesty and radiant hope, introduces us to the story of Jacob, a man who, from his mother's womb, was marked by cunning and struggle, but who, through a journey full of twists and divine encounters, was transformed from a supplanter into a prince of God. In this video, we'll dive into Jacob's life, feeling his emotions, witnessing his deceptions, and most importantly, understanding how God pursued him with his grace, culminating in moments of revelation that changed his identity forever. Our story begins even before Jacob's birth, with a prophecy given to his mother Rebekah, as she felt a strange and intense agitation in her womb, as if two powerful forces were in conflict within her. In Genesis 25-23, the Lord told her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." This divine revelation, a mysterious whisper in Rebekah's heart, already foreshadowed the rivalry between Esau, the firstborn, and Jacob, the second to be born. At birth, Esau came first, robust, covered in hair that gave him a reddish, wild appearance. And Jacob, with a small, stubborn hand, was already grasping his brother's heel, a gesture that would give him his name, one who supplants, or one who grasps the heel. Imagine the surprise and a certain awe on Rebekah's face as she saw the second child. With that firm grip, being born, the tent air filled with the first cry and the tension of an uncertain future. Isaac, the father, loved Esau, the man of the open country, the rugged hunter, with his scent of wild game and campfire smoke, and his strong, outgoing voice that brought the excitement of adventure. Rebekah, however, loved Jacob, the quiet man of the tents, with his more calculating manner, his sharp, observant gaze for details, and the sweetness of his presence in the home. This family preference would create fertile ground for discord, a climate of tension that hung over the tent, a silence charged with unspoken favoritism deeply felt by the brothers, the bitter taste of perceived injustice settling in early. Jacob's cunning soon manifested in concrete actions. In Genesis 25-29-34, we see the infamous scene where Esau, famished after an exhausting day of hunting, arrived at the tent smelling the delicious aroma of stew Jacob had prepared, a warm, comforting scent that sharpened his hunger. "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished," Esau pleaded, his voice hoarse with fatigue and his body trembling from exhaustion. Jacob, however, did not miss the opportunity and proposed a bargain that would forever change their destiny. "First sell me your birthright." Esau, his mind clouded by hunger, and perhaps underestimating the spiritual and patrimonial value of his birthright. The right of the firstborn was sacred and included a double portion of the inheritance and family leadership, replied with contempt, feeling only the burning sensation of an empty stomach. "Look, I am about to die. What good is the birthright to me?" And so, with a solemn oath uttered under the silent witness of the stars, if it was night, or the desert sun, if it was day, he sold his right for a bowl of lentils. The taste of those lentils must have been unremarkable to Esau, just a momentary relief for physical hunger. But for Jacob, it was the sweet taste of victory, a strategic and calculated step in his pursuit of being first, a small flame of ambition that now became a wildfire. Jacob's ambition, coupled with Esau's impulsiveness and disregard for something so valuable, planted the seed of deep bitterness and rivalry that would germinate for years. Years later, the plot deepened with the deception of the paternal blessing. Isaac, now old and with failing eyesight, his eyes were like opaque veils that barely distinguished shapes, decided to bless Esau, the son he loved and for whom he had requested a dish of game, a familiar aroma he so cherished. But Rebekah, remembering the divine prophecy, and with a meticulous plan and a determined look, instigated Jacob to disguise himself. Imagine the tension in the air, the almost suffocating silence in the tent. As Jacob put on Esau's clothes, smelling the scent of field, sweat, and game imbued in them, and placed soft, damp goat skins on his hands and neck to simulate Esau's hairiness. The rough texture of the skins against his skin and the cold sweat on his back revealed his anxiety and fear of being discovered. The scene in Genesis 27 minutes and 22 seconds to 23 is charged with an almost cutting suspense, with the sound of Jacob's hoarse voice. Trying to imitate Esau's, Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So he blessed him. Isaac's faltering voice, Jacob's pounding heart as the birthright blessing was pronounced, a blessing that included dominion over his brothers, fertility, and prosperity. The taste of fraud was bitter, but the sweet dream of the blessing propelled him. When Esau returned with the game, the cry of pain and fury he let out upon discovering the deception. "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? This is the second time he has cheated me. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing." Genesis 27 to 36 echoed like thunder through the tent, filling the air with the bitterness of betrayal and the feeling of a stolen future. Esau's fury was so visceral that Jacob felt the piercing cold of fear from his brother and the loneliness of imminent exile. Jacob's flight led him to a desert of uncertainties, with no definite destination beyond to Laban in Haran. The cold, dark night fell, and he laid his head on a cold, hard stone, homeless, insecure, with his heart heavy with guilt and fear. The oppressive silence of the desert all around him. His dreams and ambitions seemed to crumble under the weight of his own schemes. But it was in this moment of desperation and solitude, of complete vulnerability, that God, in his infinite grace, reached him. In Genesis 28 to 12:15, he had a vivid dream. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And there above it stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. I am with you, and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." Imagine the celestial glow of that ladder, the graceful and ethereal movement of angels, and the resonant voice of God, not of condemnation for his past, but of promise and comfort, echoing in the profound stillness of the night, a melody of hope for a troubled heart. Jacob woke with a shiver of reverence, the sensation of divine presence still enveloping him, an unexpected warmth amidst the desert cold. He exclaimed, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." Genesis 28 to 16. He anointed the stone, called the place Bethel, house of God, and made a vow, a solemn commitment under the rising sun, with the taste of a new beginning in his mouth, the promise of a future that no longer depended solely on his own machinations. Jacob spent 20 years in the house of Laban, his uncle, living under the law of retribution, reaping deceit where he had sown deceit, a divine irony. He loved Rachel, feeling a sweet attraction to her from the very first glance, but was tricked with Leah on a dark wedding night, experiencing the bitter shock of discovery and the cold sting of betrayal the next morning when light revealed the truth. He worked hard, feeling the sun burn his skin and the cold night wind on him, as he tended Laban's flocks, being exploited and having his wages changed repeatedly, the scars of weather and labor marking his body. Frustration and resentment must have simmered within him, a sour taste in his mouth. Yet it was during these years of trials and injustices that Jacob began to mature. He experienced God's faithfulness amidst human unfaithfulness. God supernaturally increased his flocks, Genesis 30 to 25 to 43, and protected him from Laban's schemes. who changed his wages 10 times. Jacob, who once relied on his own cunning, began to see God's hand working on his behalf, which was a balm to his weary soul, a taste of divine justice that restored him. The sheep and goats, which were once a symbol of his exploitation, were now the tangible and growing proof of God's blessing, a sound of bleating and a smell of wool that heralded prosperity. The definitive turning point in Jacob's life occurs at Peniel, by the Jabbok River. Jacob was returning home from Laban, consumed by paralyzing fear of meeting Esau, who was coming to meet him with 400 men. The darkness of the night was profound, almost suffocating, and the constant murmur of the river's water was the only sound besides his gasping breath and the accelerated beating of his heart. He sent his family and possessions ahead as a desperate strategy and remained alone, his nerves on edge. In Genesis 32:24-30, we read, "So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he would not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, 'Let me go, for it is daybreak.' But Jacob replied, 'I will not let you go unless you bless me.' The man asked him, 'What is your name?' 'Jacob,' he answered. Then the man said, 'Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome.' Jacob said, 'Please tell me your name.' But he replied, 'Why do you ask my name?' Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, 'It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared.' Imagine the sharp physical pain when his hip was wrenched, painful crack echoing in his mind, sweat pouring down his face, the extreme exhaustion of an all-night struggle, but the unyielding will not to let go, to cling to that mysterious being. He did not wrestle to win physically, but to receive a blessing, a recognition, a divine guarantee. This struggle was not against an enemy to be supplanted, but an encounter of surrender and transformation with God himself, a tight embrace that broke him down and remade him. The change of Jacob's name to Israel, Prince of God, or He Struggles with God, was not merely a nominal alteration. It was a complete redefinition of his identity, feeling the chill of the morning air on his face and the sweet and liberating sensation of a new purpose flooding his soul. He, the supplanter, would now limp for the rest of his life, a visible and constant reminder of the night his strength broke so that God's grace could prevail, a tangible sign of his new dependence and the blessing given to him. Jacob's transformation is proof that God does not give up on us, even when we are flawed and full of deceit. He pursues, he wrestles with us, and for us, and he transforms us. The reunion with Esau, once feared, is now marked by forgiveness and reconciliation. Genesis 33. Jacob, who once trembled with fear, now approaches with humility, bowing down 7 times before reaching his brother. Esau, who had sworn vengeance, runs to meet him, the warmth of his embrace melting years of bitterness, the sound of both brothers weeping tears of relief and reconciliation. This is the beauty of redemption, the freedom from guilt, the relief from oppressive tension, the warm embrace of forgiveness that heals old wounds. Jacob's story is the story of sovereign grace working in the depths of human character, using every struggle and every mistake to mold us into vessels of honor. It teaches us that our names, our labels, or our pasts do not define our future with God. What defines us is his transformative intervention, the divine touch that enables us to wrestle with God and prevail, not by our own strength, but by the strength of his blessing and his infinite mercy. It is proof that, even when we stumble, God's firm hand is there to lift us up. Jacob's life is a mirror for our own journey. How many times, like him, do we try to achieve blessings and purposes by our own strength, cunning, or manipulation, feeling the weariness of carrying a heavy burden that was not ours? How many times do we flee from the consequences of our actions, only to find God in the most unexpected places, in the silence of a lonely night or the agony of an exhausting struggle? Jacob's message is a melody of hope that resonates through the centuries. No matter how complicated or stained your past, God is willing to have a transformative encounter with you. He is ready to change your name, your identity, and direct your life to a purpose greater than you ever imagined. Let the echo of his limbic pineal be a reminder that true strength does not lie in our ability to supplant, but in our surrender and dependence on a God who fights for us and blesses us abundantly. Feel the comforting warmth of this truth filling your heart. If this video brought peace and clarity to your heart, I encourage you to hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this liberating truth, and of course, subscribe to Heaven's Echoes for more soul-nourishing messages that strengthen your faith. May God's sovereignty be your greatest certainty and your deepest source of peace. Your faith journey continues here with us.